And then those 3 months of research culminated into this free online course I created called The Dark Side of Vaccines, the Less Publicized Story of Vaccine Safety and Efficacy. And in that course, I examine vaccine safety and efficacy concerns, both past and present. And I start the course with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who is a spiritual figure and saintly person whose reputation precedes him. I'm sure everyone listening to this has heard his name and is familiar with him. And about 100 years ago, Gandhi wrote a book titled A Guide to Health. And in that book, he has a chapter on smallpox where he talks about vaccines. And if I can, I just want to share a few quotes from that chapter of Gandhi's book. Is that okay?
No, absolutely. And it's actually, when I saw a piece of that quote on a promotion for Dark Side of Vaccines, that really got me much more interested, because I'm a close follower of Gandhiji's work, and I thought it was really great that you posted it. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just read a few quotes here straight from his book. These are his words. Quote, "Vaccination is a barbarous practice, and it is one of the most fatal of all the delusions current in our time. Its supporters are not content with its adoption by those who have no objection to it, but seek to impose it with the aid of penal laws and rigorous punishments on all people alike. I cannot help also feeling that vaccination is a violation of the dictates of religion and morality. Those who are conscientious objectors to vaccination should have the courage to face all penalties or persecutions to which they may be subjected by law, and stand alone, if need be, against the whole world in defense of their conviction." End quote. And so those are very strong words by a man who's considered an apostle of nonviolence and a champion for peace in our world. And I start with this quote to show people that the vaccine debate is nothing new. It certainly didn't start with Andrew Wakefield. And there has been opposition to vaccines for as long as vaccines have existed, even during the time of smallpox, which was a very fatal infectious disease. And not without good reason, because there have been numerous historical incidents that vaccines have caused serious disability and sometimes even death.
And so just so I understand and your viewers understand, because and I'll tell you our position here at Bhakta School and Soma Essential Healing and Wellbeing. But from digging down into your course, it's my understanding that you are not completely anti-vaccine, that you are about safety in vaccines and about people understanding what's in them before they take them, and that they should not be imposed lawfully on people when they don't want to take them, correct?
That's correct. You know, for me personally, I don't see vaccines as being inherently good or bad. I think what determines whether a vaccine is good or bad is who manufactured that vaccine, what were the ingredients used in the manufacture of that vaccine, and how is that vaccine manufactured? And that will then go on to determine the individual safety and efficacy profile for that specific brand of vaccine.
And so, also for the person, right? Because a lot of people have compromised immune systems.
Well, everyone is going to react differently to every medication, not just vaccines. So, you know, and so I think we can all agree that the future of medicine really is personalized medicine. It's not one size fits all, because everyone is unique and different. We have a different microbiome, we have different genetics. So it doesn't make sense that, you know, you have like a 300-pound man, you're going to give them the same vaccine as a 10-pound baby. Like, how does that make sense, right? And then the research is showing there's differences between men and women, how their immune system works, but we give the same vaccines to them, the same amounts. And so, yeah, we really do need a more tailored approach, you know, more personalized medicine, I think, is the future.
Well, your view and ours is completely in alignment. And I've had some interesting recent conversations with immunologists, because I have a theory, and some of them agree with me, and probably it's not just my theory, but that when you broad brush vaccinating entire populations of people, knowing that their bodies are different, that the immune systems are weaker, in some cases underdeveloped, compromised, that over and over again, let's take the flu, that people are getting flu vaccinations every year.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why we have flu epidemics every year, is my strong feeling, and some of these immunologists agree with me.
So get this, this is related to both the flu shot as well as the novel coronavirus, or coronavirus in general, rather. So earlier this year, in January of 2020, a study was published out of the Department of Defense, and they were looking at people, I think it was military personnel, who got the flu shot. And what they found was that there was an increased risk of getting coronavirus. For the
Yeah.
people who had gotten the flu shot, it was a 36% increase in the odds ratio. So, that's one study. It doesn't prove causation, but it does show that association. If that's actually a real association and a real increased risk, then we have to ask ourselves, did we just reduce the rate of influenza through the flu shot only to increase the rate of coronavirus? And if that's the case, this year we're seeing this huge thing with the coronavirus outbreak. Some people are still recommending the flu shot. It may actually be exacerbating the situation, or it's possible. I'm not saying it's definitive that it's causing it, but it's possible. We need to examine that possibility given this study that just came out earlier this year. And so it's possible that, yeah, maybe we are, because of the flu shot itself, decreasing rates of influenza, but increasing rates of coronavirus. And everyone is freaking out about the coronavirus. No one really, that I know, has been freaking out about influenza, which we've seen every single year, the seasonal flu, which has killed so many more people than coronavirus has so far. Looking at, we can talk about this later if you want, but I'll just mention it because I'm on the topic right now. But if you believe the CDC's own data, they say that, I think in 2017, they said that 61,000 Americans died in 2017, 2018, that flu season, from influenza-associated disease.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to compare that number, 61,000 Americans. How many Americans are going to die from coronavirus? Is it going to be even close to 61,000? If it exceeds that, I think that all the hysteria is justified. And then around the World Health Organization has said that up to 650,000 people die from influenza-associated disease every year. 650,000 people. Now we have to compare the number of people who die from the novel coronavirus and compare that to the 650,000 people who normally die from influenza. And if it exceeds that, then I think that the hysteria and everything is justified. But if it doesn't exceed that, then I think we really have to ask what's going on here. Why is there so much hysteria? Is the hysteria justified? And are all the kind of draconian measures that we're seeing now with quarantine and all this forced vaccine stuff, is it justified? That's the question I think we really have to ask ourselves.
Right. I think you're absolutely correct. And you said something else that I want my viewers to understand, which is that a lot of people who get sick during flu season are not always getting sick from the flu. They're getting sick because the flu is overburdening their immune systems, and they have already a chronic health condition or disease that they're suffering from that makes them sicker.
There was a study that was done. It was a randomized controlled trial. I think it was done out of Taiwan, and they looked at one specific flu shot. I think it was inactivated trivalent influenza vaccine, and they actually compared it to a placebo, which we can talk more about later. It's very rare to use that study design where they actually have a control group given an inert placebo. And they found that the people who were given that flu shot had a 4.4-fold increased risk of getting other non-influenza respiratory tract infections. And so the authors conclude that it's possible that, maybe it does protect against influenza, although in that study, they didn't even find it offered protection against influenza, but it's possible that it could. But the cost then is that it may have a negative impact on the immune system in such a way that it leaves people more susceptible to other respiratory infections that are not caused by influenza. And people need to understand that influenza is just one virus amongst dozens, or maybe even, who knows, hundreds of viruses and bacteria that can cause the same constellation of symptoms as what we call the flu. And in the scientific and medical literature, this is called influenza-like illness. And so, yeah, we can talk more about flu efficacy later on, but I'll just, say that for now.
These are excellent points. So now let's go back. Tell us a little bit more about what's in the online course, Dark Side of Vaccines, what people can expect, and why, particularly because you're offering for free now, why everybody should really get online and study this course.
Yeah, I start the course off and I talk about some historical vaccine safety issues. And I think it's really important for people to understand the history of vaccines in order to be aware of certain dangers that have been present in the past so that we can know. Because now, people are saying, oh, we're going to come out with a new novel coronavirus vaccine. They're rushing it through under this pandemic emergency. And they may not safety test it properly. Like normally when you safety test a vaccine, you do it first in animals, see how it affects the animal, and then you move on to humans. But in Seattle, they just started the first trial. They went straight to humans. They didn't even do it in animals. So we have to, we have to understand history. So I start off the course and I mentioned a couple historical vaccine safety concerns. And the first one is called the Qatar Incident. And both of these things that I mentioned have to do with the polio vaccine, which is heralded as this miracle of modern medicine. We almost never hear about these historical concerns in the mainstream news and media. But in 1955, Qatar Laboratories manufactured batches of polio vaccine that contained live polio virus, despite having passed required safety testing. And these vaccines were given to the public, and according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, this resulted in, quote, over 250 cases of polio and many cases of paralysis. So remember that number, over 250 cases. But when we look at the peer-reviewed medical literature, according to an article titled Deaths Following Vaccination, What Does the Evidence Show? We find that the Qatar incident was actually responsible for 40,000 cases of polio, resulting in 51 cases of permanent paralysis and 5 deaths among vaccinated individuals, and 113 cases of paralysis and 5 deaths among contacts of vaccinated individuals. So live polio vaccine sheds the polio virus, and it's contagious. And so that's why some unvaccinated people could also get polio, develop paralysis, and a handful of them even died. But this is a good example of how the CDC operates. Technically, 40,000 cases is over 250 cases. But how misleading is that statement? The CDC is off by a factor of more than 100, and yet somehow this is the institution that we rely on, that we go to for supposedly reliable information, and that's supposed to ensure the safety of and efficacy of vaccines. So, that's just one example of sort of how the CDC operates.
So again, I just want to remind people as we're having this conversation with Luke Yamaguchi that neither he nor I nor Whole Life Transformation Summit are against or for vaccines. We want safety measures, and we want laws that protect people from being forced to take vaccines, particularly when they've studied the vaccines and know that there are harmful ingredients, and in some cases, carcinogenic ingredients in these vaccines. CDC has its own report that they put up on their website of a list of vaccines that do include known carcinogens. And so just want our viewers to understand that this is not an anti-vaccine interview. This is anti-foolishness when it comes to safety. And that's what we're talking about. And this is one of the things that Luke's course is really going to help you viewers understand why it's so important. We have a phrase here: if you wouldn't smell it, you wouldn't touch it, you wouldn't eat it, perhaps you wouldn't even look at it, you probably shouldn't inject it into your veins.
Or into your body. Yeah, they don't inject it directly into the veins, but it's either intramuscular or subcutaneous, but it still goes into the body.
And then there was this whole row over measles, mumps, rubella, the MMR vaccine late last year when states started to consider removing all the exemptions, and they had this big breakout in Maine. And I just want to remind viewers that there was a public statement made by the governor of Maine later on admitting that the breakout he felt after looking at the data was due to people being vaccinated with MMR, children being vaccinated with MMR in the state, and there was something wrong with the vaccine. And he actually came out publicly and said that. So this is just another really important reason why people need to be educated.
Yeah, so the MMR vaccine is a live virus vaccine. And anytime you have a live virus vaccine, there's the small chance that it could actually give you the very infectious disease that it's designed to prevent. And there's also the risk that it could shed the virus as well. That's what we saw with the polio vaccine, with the Qatar incident. And in California in 2015, when they had the big measles outbreak at Disneyland, later on they did the serotyping for the strains, and they found that 38% of the people who had measles at that outbreak was vaccine-strained measles. So either they got the measles from the vaccine, or someone who got the vaccine transmitted that virus to someone else, and that's how they got the vaccine-strained measles. So it's a very important point that people should also understand.